Ed Rollins, who served in 3 presidential administrations, the chief political advisor to the House Republican leadership, the dean himself, and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Post, Michael Goodwin. Both are Fox News contributors and great Americans.
Thank you.
Michael, let's start with you tonight. The president started a firestorm on social media with his discussions of a quote-unquote an agreement,
right.
As Senator Chuck Schumer styled it. I love the fact that Schumer is out pushing what happened in a meeting with the President of the United States before the President can even address the matter.
That's a shock, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Look, I think the next time the President's going to have dinner alone with Democrats, he better bring a food taster. Because I think that the end result of this, while I applaud the President for working with Democrats last week, I think this week it looks like he's rushing ahead of his skis and getting too far out there making a deal when his backtracking today on what exactly he agreed to, putting out several different statements through tweets and in his own comments, I'm not really sure what they did agree to at this point.
Well,
I'm not sure where it stands,
an agreement at all,
or where the wall stands, most importantly here.
What do you make of it, Ed?
What I make of it is, if you're going to have an agreement, you're going to sit down with the Democrats. What are you getting back in return? We've got a big tax bill coming up. We're struggling on a health care bill. Is Schumer going to give him the 1 or 2 or 5 votes that he needs to get the health care bill through? Is Mrs. Pelosi going to round up Democrats to support his tax bill? If not, he shouldn't even be discussing anything with them. My issue here, and you just touched on it in the beginning statement, the White House staff. The big story today is Jared Kushner is having a big meeting with high-powered people to talk about how we basically get prisoners back into society again. That should not be at the White House. That should be at the Department of Labor. Cohen is meeting next week.
Justice Department.
Cohen is meeting next week with the UN, all the world leaders coming in here. He wants to meet with people interested in his environmental platform, which isn't the president's platform. The president ought to have his team basically out there scrounging, pushing, twisting arms to get this tax bill through. And if he doesn't do that, the rest of it doesn't matter.
Michael, following its 2 points there, and I think they're absolutely correct. Following that, what is the chief of staff doing here? Why is he permitting Gary Cohn, Jared Kushner, to take on these initiatives as if the president weren't in Florida with the First Lady meeting with the victims of Hurricane Irma, assessing damage? It's an extraordinary, to me at least, departure from what normally would be happening in a White House.
Well, look, the events of the last 24 hours or so do speak to some kind of a breakdown or a train wreck that I can't make sense of. I actually have been saying recently that Trump, I thought, was doing really well. I thought Kelly had brought some unifying messaging to the White House. Things had been going pretty well. But the last 24 hours seemed like a reversal in a lot of ways. I mean, Ed's point about not getting anything, I mean, I think the kindest thing you can say is he wants to get DACA out of the way, wants to get everything out of the way for taxes. But if you're not going to make a good bargain, then you're just digging yourself, creating new problems down the road.
Well, the president surely, as Paul Ryan pointed out, knows that the negotiation will take place in part with the Republican leadership, whether it be the Speaker's office or the leader's office over in the Senate. All of that has to happen with the majority party.
Right.
So any declaration by Schumer is premature at best, even though the president and he may agree on which way the wind is blowing on the southern border. I don't know. But it's interesting that people are trying to drive a wedge between this president and the base right now. And those people are the Dems, the left wing, and, of course, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and all of their great friends over at K Street, including the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable.
Well, he's going to change the town, and he's going to change the town by winning some victories here in the near future. I lived through the '86 immigration bill. We had promises from the Congress when they passed it that they were going to supply not a wall, but basically more border security. We let all the illegals in that wanted to be qualified, and we did nothing. We did nothing.
There is no guarantee that could be offered by Chuck Schumer,
right,
who is so wantonly bereft of integrity that I cannot imagine why anyone would trust such an ideological partisan to enter into a quote-unquote finite agreement,
right.
which he claimed.
Well, look, and I think we all agree that the wall is so central to the president's appeal and to his election that you take the wall out of all of this.
Is it symbolic with the base, or is it a manifest promise by this president, perceived as such by the base?
I think to the base, it's a manifest promise. I think to everybody else, it's symbolic. But to the base, it matters maybe more than anything else.
And I would argue more than symbolic. I would argue it is something we need to basically secure that border. That border we have had.
Yeah. The remarkable thing here is that this president, not only in terms of illegal immigration, but addressing that border, because it is where most of the majority of marijuana, methamphetamines, cocaine, and heroin. Right. It's where those drugs, the majority of them, come into this country. Yeah. And he is the only candidate of, what was it, 17 of them? Right. And then in the general election, to deal with the issue of what drugs are doing to this country. Illegal drugs and legal.
And I think the problem today is he has called into doubt his own commitment to it, at least through several cycles. And I think that's a major mistake.
It's a major mistake. It is also a mistake that it is not inexplicable. It is, people do not appreciate the strength of this president, because he is isolated in that White House from so many of the advisors with whom he's worked over 2 years in reaching, more than 2 years, in reaching the White House. But also, he is under assault day after day after day, not only by the national left-wing media, the establishment of this country that he ran against and understood that he would be at war with, but his own party in the persons of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. If there is any way this president, the Republican Party, can get Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell out of those positions, the national interest will be well served and brighter days will await us all.
Well, the slogan has to be for every Republican running, build a wall, and then we'll talk about comprehensive immigration later.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's wall, wall, wall. If he gives up on the wall, he's gutted the movement.
Right.
Yeah, he's made no suggestion, certainly, that, to my knowledge, that he's given up on the wall. In fact, he talks about putting it later. Perhaps the talk should be about advancing the schedule. Right. Ed, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Michael, thank you, as always. For more now on the battle over tax reform, we're joined by Tony Sayegh, Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Treasury Department, and it's good to have you with us, Tony.
Lou, it's great to be with you and your viewers. Thanks for having me.
Let's turn to, first of all, tax reform. And I hear from this president, 15% for a corporate rate. And then I hear from the Treasury Secretary a different, some mitigation of that. Then I hear from another cabinet officer or advisor to the president, or Paul Ryan, that, you know, something like 20% is better. What in the world is going on?
Well, look, Lou, we have been pushing the 50% number because it's the most pro-growth. It's going to make us the most competitive in the world, and that's where America should be, at number one. We know, as the president said in his speech in North Dakota, when you level the playing field for the American worker, we win every time, and that's the number we want. The Treasury Secretary was simply saying that as we're pushing that number, we still have our eye on the fact that this is a negotiation with Congress, and we need to make sure at the end of that process we get the most competitive number, but we still stick to 15%.
And the middle class, the president focusing on middle-class tax cuts, yet we hear the 15% number, but we don't hear the number for the middle class. Why not?
Well, look, rates are being discussed, but there is something that's absolutely certain, and that's the middle-income, hardworking family is the focus of the president's agenda when it comes to the individual side of tax cuts. And we are going to lower rates. We're going to increase the standard deduction, in some cases doubling it. So the first $24,000 of a taxpayer family that files jointly, married couple, is not taxed. That's a significant middle-income tax cut. We're going to simplify the taxes so most middle-income families could fill their taxes out on one page. And we're going to, because of what we're doing on the business side by reducing these terribly high, uncompetitive rates, also do something where paychecks are increased and workers get the pay raise they deserve. Because we know from our studies, Lou, that 70% of the tax burden on business is borne by the worker, and that's what we're trying to address on the business side, but that helps the individual worker.
And let's talk about that business tax cut, because it's bold, it's very easy for everybody to understand, which is ironic, considering that the middle class is the emphasis, and there isn't a number. There isn't something solid and concrete that can help shape your message to the middle class and to the president's base. And it just seems like it would be a very good idea for you all to put that number in some form or the other out there for folks to comprehend and ultimately support. Let me turn to another area where we have some ambiguity, and that is an estimated $3 to $4 trillion parked in overseas banks by corporate America, U.S. multinationals. Now, there's no reason for that money to be over there, because that money should be here. But it's not here because corporate America has taken advantage of all sorts of loopholes to do so. And they're loopholes. This is not a matter of economic force driving it. That's a decision by corporate America. How will the Trump administration incentivize those companies to move that money back to this country and to invest it and create jobs?
Well, look, Lou, you're absolutely right. We actually consider whatever we put out in the tax legislation, and details will be coming out September 25th,
right,
as essentially a jobs bill. We have a model in which our corporate tax rate is at 35%. That's 15 points higher than the average competitor we have overseas. They've lowered their rates in the last 30 years. We haven't, and that makes us less competitive. That's created the dynamic that you've just described, where American companies' profits are fine. They're just not being reinvested in America. They're being parked overseas.
That's an attitude and the conduct and the choice of corporate America that is frankly un-American.
Yes,
and that has to be changed.
And that's what the president's doing. He talks about going from an offshoring model, which is what we have now, to an American model. So you
But how do you incentivize those companies?
You reduce the taxes. Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about the fact that we put out 15% is where we think that tax rate should be. We're going to go from a worldwide system to a territorial one, so these companies have to pay taxes to the United States. That's what our competitors overseas have done, and it works for them. It's sad that an American subsidiary has a more competitive advantage to operate in this country under a foreign company than as an American company. That's totally counterintuitive, and it hurts our product, it hurts our workers, and it reinforces the fact, Lou, that many people in this country think this system is rigged against them, whether it's on the corporate side, whether it's on the individual side. And the last piece of this is the business taxes. We talk about corporations a lot. We're going to reduce the business taxes as well significantly, so our mom and pop shops and sole proprietors and a lot of the pass-throughs also benefit from a much more lower and competitive rate.
Washington Times opinion editor Charlie Hurt, coming to us tonight, by the way, from Liberty University. I mean, they are, I'm double checking the record here, 2-0, the first in the Big South. And President Falwell told me last year that they're going to surprise folks, and indeed they are.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. And this is their first year in the conference, and it's a tremendous thing.
Well, anyway, I'm sorry to start with football, but I just found that fascinating, and President Falwell backing up his, if you will, brag on the field of play, or at least with some very good young men who are backing him up. Let's turn.
And you should see the campus too. I mean, what they've done down here is just absolutely amazing. It's really, truly gorgeous what they've put into this place over the last 10 years.
And it's great to see the success of the university. It's truly. Let's turn to the Dems and the president coming up with these late dinner session mind melds, apparently, of some sort. But with Chuck Schumer coming out of the White House to announce the grand bargain of all time, and people running with it before the White House could even react. It is your reaction to it all.
Well, anybody that finds any of this surprising obviously has not been paying attention to the first part of this administration or for the campaign over the past 2 years. This is exactly the way Donald Trump operates. And he has worked tirelessly, although hopelessly, with Republicans to get things done with them. and not only get things done that he had promised in his campaign, but all of them had promised in their campaigns. And so the idea that he's turning around now, negotiating with the Democrats, it's a smart move. It's not, as a conservative, it's not what I would rather him figure out a way to strike a deal with Republicans, because that would be a more conservative deal. But I mean, you can't blame the guy for doing this.
In the social media firestorm that did follow, it is also difficult to understand why the president, who ended DACA once, because of course it belongs in Congress as a matter of constitutional parameter, and yet he wants to be involved in it again, in bargaining, discussing, negotiating, agreeing, whatever he did with Schumer and Pelosi. I mean, it's very odd to many people that he would then sort of re-inject himself into DACA.
Yeah, but I think that he views that as being something of a bargaining chip, and as he does the wall, and if he can sort of, hey, look, the guy's not a partisan guy. He's not a conservative. He's certainly not a liberal, but he's a practical guy, a pragmatic guy. And I think,
Charlie, he does say he is conservative. That he is a conservative.
Yeah, but he's not conservative in the sort of Washington sense, which I don't think is clearly hasn't been very successful.
He's not in the Paul Ryan sense at all.
And he made this deal with the Democrats on the debt ceiling that they call it around here.
Right.
We've had that debt ceiling around here for what? 25 years. And do you know how much the debt has gone up since they put the debt ceiling on? It's gone up.
And did you listen to the morons try to defend the debt ceiling? Oh no, we can't lose the debt ceiling. What would we have to shut the government down? And would we really have to pay our bills? This is just, these are some of the most confused, conflicted people we could ever put in elected office, the leadership in the House and Senate.
And I think that that's exactly why voters sent somebody like Donald Trump, is because, he may not have even known what a debt ceiling was before he got here, but at least he's going to do something different, because we know what the outcome is going to be with these people. After 25 years of the debt ceiling, it's gone up, what, $16 trillion or $15 trillion, and people just want something to change.
Yeah, something to change, and they do want the damn wall built. Let's leave that.
Yes,
the base wants that wall built. And it's not symbolic.
And they don't like amnesty.
And yeah, I won't even say that word. I don't want to, I'm touching that word. Charlie Hurd, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lou.
Author and presidential historian Doug Weed, former special assistant to President George H.W. Bush. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Lou.
This caught a lot of people by surprise, and I will admit, including me, when the president chose to make an announcement about DACA after he had brilliantly brought the Democrats in, had pushed DACA, ended DACA, pushed it to Congress, working with the Democrats and taking the continuing resolution, the budget ceiling, and pushed it off to Congress to deal with 3 months more to spare.
Yeah.
And then suddenly involves himself again in DACA.
Yeah, yeah. I trust Donald Trump. Well, I don't trust anybody, but as much as you can trust someone in Washington, I trust Donald Trump, and I don't trust the Republicans or Democrats. So I think he may land on his feet with this yet, and I'm thrilled with finally the middle class. We get an increase in the median household income. The senior citizens, after 8 years of Obama, they've got more money in their 401ks out of Trump in just a few months than 8 years with Obama. Right. And unemployment for the poor. So I like those things. It's mourning in America, but I think this will cost him politically, because you mentioned I worked with George H.W. Bush, and I traveled with him for several years on the road, and he did not like that line, read my lips, no new taxes. He'd say, I'm not going to give that in the speech today, but he'd get out there and the crowd was just, they'd suck it out of him. They'd draw it out of him. And I remember in the practice debate, he winced in the middle of the debate, he said, I don't want to get stuck on taxes. And I was thinking to myself, well, boy, pal, you are forever. You're stuck with, and sure enough, when he was nominated at the convention and accepted his nomination in 1988 in New Orleans, he used that great line. It was the biggest line, read my lips, no new taxes, build the wall. And Trump is nailed to that wall. So it may not cost him re-election, but it's going to cost him something, and it might cost him re-election.
Well, he says he's going to build it. He says it's just going to be a little later than he wanted. It was going to be day one that he was going to deal with DACA and other issues. But, you know, I think the base can deal with a delay. They could never deal with a canceled wall. It's not symbolic to the base. It is absolutely a commitment, a promise, a guarantee on the part of this president, which he's going to have to meet if he is to preserve what is an extraordinary relationship with his base.
You're right. I think he knows that. We'll see. We'll see what he gets out of this and how far he takes this with the Democrats.
What would you have him do with Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell? Because they're nothing more than hacks. They've been there far too long. Ryan, 20 years, more than 3 decades. For Mitch McConnell, they've never done anything. They haven't passed significant legislation of any kind. Even the volume, I think Ryan has moved 3 bills in his entire career, one of them to name a post office. I mean, these are not accomplished, brilliant legislators.
I don't know. Maybe you could expose some of the corruption. There's so much corruption in Washington. If they started pulling on the thread, the whole sweater would come undone.
We've tugged on that, and it's a swamp, partner. It's not a sweater, I'll tell you, as you well know. Doug Weed, thanks for being with us. We appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Lou.
Doug Weed, presidential historian.